Good afternoon, and thank you very much for coming along to this afternoon session on pillars of our common future, competitiveness and economic security. To get us going, I'm honored to introduce to you to give an opening keynote address, the Polish State Secretary for Strategic Energy Infrastructure and Deputy Minister for Industry. Please welcome Mr. Wojciech Wrochna. Wojciech, the floor is yours.
Good evening, or good afternoon, actually. Thank you very much for the invitation. It's a pleasure to be here. And let me address you a couple of words about the future of the energy markets and the challenges ahead. So before I start, I'll share with you my experience. I have joined the government November last year, so I'm quite freshman in the government. But I have over 15 years of experience working in the energy sector in different subsectors, from offshore wind through onshore wind, biofuels, biomethane, biogas, and nuclear. So I believe that I can combine both this experience working in the private sector and for the government as well. So over the last couple of weeks, I had a pleasure to listen to the Commissioner Jørgensen speaking about the future of the energy markets and the future of energy prices and the competitiveness. And he was referring to the Draghi report. We remember that the Draghi report is all about the competitiveness. And he said that while reading this report, he saw the word energy mentioned more than 800 times. I have not double-checked whether this exact figure, but I do believe that the future of European competitiveness, to a very large extent, depends on how do we shape our energy markets and what would be the price of the electricity in the coming years. And when we're talking about the industry, we're talking about the competitiveness, I believe that we need to take into account the industry of today, but the industry of tomorrow as well. So speaking about steel works, we all know that it requires huge volumes of electricity to be consumed in order to give the final product. But when we speak about the industry of tomorrow, I mean here the data centers, the artificial intelligence, this also requires a huge amount of electricity. So both the industry of today, the industry of tomorrow, is all about the consumption of the energy. But we're speaking about large businesses here. We're speaking about the hyperscalers that are currently discussing to use a large amount of nuclear in order to feed their data centers, to feed the AI. But we cannot forget about the SMEs that are very often in a very particular situation because they do not have access to money, because they do not access to the know-how when it comes to the discussion about how the best shape their energy deliveries. And I can here refer to the very particular situation I had while being in the business sector, when we have been dealing with the a small medium company that is producing and has a factory in the east of Poland. Actually, it's a company of around 500 to 600 people producing a global product, so well present on the European market, but also on the US market and on Asian markets. But the rather, let's say, a simple profile of production with relatively low margins, and in addition, to some extent depending on low electricity price. So not a truly energy intensive company, but the company that is producing 24/7 for 12 months in a year. And they came to us asking that they want to be they want to have a green, clean energy to be delivered to their factory. And then we started to discuss very often on the very academic level what's the best solution. And we basically, at certain point in time, set up 3 criteria against which we were assessing the best solution for them. I mean, the first was having the clean energy, what was the objective of the task itself. The second was having the electricity at affordable price. And the third was having this electricity to be delivered in a stable manner to the facility, because as I said, they were producing 24/7, and then any disruption of the energy delivery could harm the business profile. And having this exercise being examined, we basically went to the conclusion that, okay, the objective was to have clean energy. But before we get clean energy, or even most important, having clean energy, is to have energy at all. And also have energy at the affordable price, because without having the energy and without having the energy at an affordable price, the production could not last for longer and the company would not be competitive. So we see that, I mean, from this very particular perspective, that we need to guarantee clean energy, we need to guarantee the energy at the affordable price, and we need to deliver electricity with the certain continuity, so without major disruptions. When we basically look at the competitiveness of European industry, and we discuss the recent communications from the European Commission on clean industrial deal, as well as at the on the price affordability, we basically can see that it follows more or less the directions and lines that were taken by the European Commission already some time ago, with some adjustments to it. And I believe it's a good direction, but I would also say there are some things that we could discuss more. We discuss green energy, we discuss deployment of renewables, we discuss networks, we discuss interconnectivity, but I would like to also hear and discuss about a bit more about the third pillar, so the generation adequacy, because as I mentioned, we need electricity at a good price, we need clean energy, but we also need to make sure that we have the energy to be delivered to the final users, to the industry, to the households at all hours. And it is also important from the energy security perspective. So something that is very essential to the state security interest. And I mean, they, as I said, the documents discussion a lot of things. It discusses decoupling energy at the wholesale market from the retail markets. So all of this go into the right direction. And I believe that I'm saying it from the industry perspective, but also from the presidency perspective, that we will work together with all the stakeholders to translate these proposals into the action. But I give you a very a good example of how we could work better in order, or how we could trying to reshape also the situation with the generation adequacy. We have in Poland the working capacity market. It's the legislation that was set up in the 2018 that was notified to the European Commission, and the Polish end users, in order to guarantee the generation adequacy, are paying billions of Polish zlotys every year in order to guarantee the security of supply. In a situation when there is a problem with the generation adequacy, the so-called stress event is called. It requires all beneficiaries of the capacity market to deliver electricity to the grid in order to meet the demand. But the problem is that with the working market coupling principle, in a situation when there is a generation adequacy concern, and it happens that the same situation is on the Polish market, but also adjacent market as well, like the Czech market, the German market, then the electricity starts to flow to Germany, because then the prices are set up there significantly higher than on the Polish market. Then it makes that the Polish concept of the capacity market does not make really sense, because the Polish grid users pay a lot of money to guarantee the security of supply. But then in a stress event, they simply lack the capacity, or the electricity that is flowing into the other markets. So this is something, I think, I believe we need to discuss as well. And I also, to end this short introduction, I would like also raise a very good concept that already exists in the EU law. I mean the concept of the energy solidarity. In order to build European markets that can develop when the electricity can flow in times when there is enough generation, but also in the situation when we have problems with the generation adequacy, we need to have instruments, and we need to have certain trust between the member states. And there is a concept that was introduced by the EU Court of Justice in the Opel case, when he was discussing the exemption from certain rules of the gas directive, that the energy solidarity is a legal concept that has to be implemented by the member states and by the European Commission, and it's a binding legal obligation. It's not just a political statement, and we need to live with the European solidarity, but it's the legal concept. So the very precise provision addressed to the member states and addressed to the EU institutions. And if we try to translate this concept of the energy solidarity into the legal framework that allows on the one hand to keep the markets working, but on the other hand, on the stress situations, enhance the certain mechanism that would allow for the just, fair and transparent meeting of the demand in the different member states. I think that's the direction what is desired, and the direction where we can all succeed in achieving this very challenging objective of getting our economies decarbonized and working the European energy market and working the energy market much better. As I said at the very beginning, the industry needs to have clean electricity. Industry needs to have energy at the affordable price, and the industry needs to have the assurance that they will get the energy when they need it. So I will leave you here with this idea, and looking forward to engage into the discussion. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Wojciech. Now, please welcome our second opening keynote speaker, the Dean of Sciences Po, Paris School of International Affairs, Arancha González Laya. Arancha, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you. And let me tell you, to start this conversation, and I'll try to zoom out from where Wojciech left it, fully agreeing with the considerations that you've put on the table. Let me start by saying that you have a great sense of timing. And having this conversation and having it today and having it here in Brussels and having it in Europe is exactly what we need. If we talk about competitiveness, and this is a summit on competitiveness, I would say that where Europe is today is at the crossroad of three challenges. Challenge number one is to decarbonize, to tackle the difficulties that climate change poses to all of us, which is an existential challenge, and more broadly, with the protection of our nature capital. That's what I call the sustainability challenge. Challenge number two is to maintain global competitiveness at a time when there is fierce competition in international market. This is the competitiveness challenge. But the third challenge, maybe one that we had not so much anticipated, is the fact that the geopolitical landscape is changing, and is changing for the worse with rising geopolitical tensions. And this puts to us a third challenge, which is the economic security challenge. So this is the trilemma that, in a way, Europe has to navigate. It has to find a sweet spot in these three sides of the triangle. A triangle that was very much tilted to one side, which was sustainability, where the last 5 years we made huge efforts on that part of the triangle, perhaps not paying enough attention to sustainability, and for sure not anticipating the dark clouds on the geopolitical environment. So now it's all about finding this fine balance between these three considerations. Of course, we have to do this with a European strategy that is European, unified, but sufficiently adaptable to help us to navigate. It has to be addressing the trade-offs. We can't sweep the trade-offs under the table because there are trade-offs in each one of the sides of this triangle and also between the three sides of the triangle. We have to look at what and how we do the short term, but thinking that there is a medium to long-term path that we cannot disregard, and then putting the private and the public to work together under this unified European strategy. So let me very briefly describe how I see the challenges in each one of the sides of the triangle to see if we can then in the conversation find that sweet spot. On the sustainability front, I think Europe needs to keep the targets. And why am I saying this? Because the targets give a stability. They give predictability. And this is a premium in markets today. Stability and predictability is on short supply. So if Europe can supply that by staying the course on the targets, I think it will get a lot out of markets. Now, of course, what we have to do better is the path towards that, these objectives. Is in the transition that we probably have to do better, and to do better, in my view, in two fundamental ways. The first one has to do with which technology choices we choose, whether it's for energy, whether it's for the electric vehicle, whether it's to decarbonize difficult to abate industrial sectors. Flexibility on the technological choices will be important because that will help us make progress at a path and with a cost that we can afford. The second part of the path that we need to get better is probably on the demand side. There is a lot that we can do to tease out the demand side. The Clean Industrial Deal has put a number of ideas on that front, whether it's with public procurement, whether it's with support to stimulate consumptions with incentives. But these are two areas where we can do better the sustainability part. Second is the competitiveness front. And on this one, I'm sorry to say, we know what needs doing. It's energy. I 100% support your message this afternoon. A big part of our lack of competitiveness has to do with too high energy costs compared to our big competitors. It's financing costs and it's skills. These are the three things that make the competitiveness today. And the three have in common that they have to be part and parcel of integrating the European single market. So this is where I think we know what needs doing, but we just now have to walk the talk. There is, in this making the internal market function better, there is obviously the regulatory dimension. I think the Clean Industrial Deal has acknowledged this. It's basically reducing the red tape and the burden on the regulatory side with, in my view, regulations that were probably produced too much in silos and without realizing the interconnection between the different regulatory frameworks that have been developed. Third and final, on the security front, I leave Russia aside because there is an entire session on defense, which is extremely important to this conversation. I will focus on the US and China. First, we need to get used to the necessity to navigate a much more predatory United States. This is a reality. So we have to learn to deal with an administration that is ready to use trade and economic coercion to achieve other objectives. Whether the other objectives is to finance an excessive deficit at home, whether it's territorial gains, whether it's defense investments, or whether it's deregulation on the European market. This is the name of the game. So on this one, frankly, having been in the past, having lived in the European Commission on a competence that is international trade, we know to do it. We just have to stand united. On the Chinese side, my sense is that we need to define a functional relationship with China. I don't think we need to replace the US with China because, frankly speaking, this is just simply two different propositions. But if I look at China and I see that it's 30% plus of emissions today, 13% of international trade, 15% of global GDP, we cannot not have a functional relationship with China, and we have to be able to define it. Define it defending our interest, not defending somebody else's interest. The worst that could happen to Europe is that the US and China find a sweet spot, and we become the variable of adjustment of their sweet spot. Finally, I would say that in doing all of this, we need to remember that there is a whole world out there that is exactly facing the same stark choices on sustainability, on competitiveness, and on economic security that the EU is facing. So we've got lots of friends with whom we can make alliances to build resilience and to help us navigate these troubled waters. So let me end by saying that the beginning of the year was all about overestimating the solidity of the US economy and underestimating the European economy. I think the cursor is now moving to maybe put the EU in its right place. A boring, slow, but stable and predictable space that can become good for Europe, but also a magnet for others to invest here. Thank you, and look forward to the conversation.
Thank you very much, Arancha. Ditte Jørgensen, Director General for Energy in the European Commission. Wojciech and Arancha have highlighted that energy is central, if not fundamental, to our economic security and competitiveness. You are immersed in trying to ensure that energy delivers. Competitiveness, economic security, clean industrial deal, affordable energy action plan. Tell us about it.
I am mic'd up, yes, sorry for that. And I fully agree with Wojciech and Arancha. Thank you very much for setting the scene, both of you. Indeed, energy and energy pricing is not the only challenge we have for our competitiveness and our economic security, but it is a central challenge, which was reflected in the fact that, together with the Clean Industrial Deal addressing a number of the issues that require change and acceleration, energy policy had its own action plan for affordable energy. Now, in drawing up this action plan, in identifying what is it we need to do, we of course built on everything that has been happening over the last decade and notably over the last 5 years. As Arancha said, we have set ourselves target, there is predictability, there's stability, we know what the direction is. So this is not about the direction, it is about how do we stay the course but do it in a way that is smarter and better for our competitiveness. The challenge in doing that is that on the one hand we need results quickly. The high energy prices in Europe compared to our main competitors really is a significant challenge, and it's a challenge here and now for our industry. We just spoke about it. We need to do something. At the same time, we know that to really bring down energy prices in Europe, we need structural change. We need investments, we need infrastructure, we need things that take a bit of time. We also know that this very good regulatory framework we have needs to deliver, we need to implement, we need to see action and results on the ground. And then we know that in doing all of that, we have to do it in a way that does not compromise our security. So we need to be prepared for another crisis, for other challenges in the security, as we have seen over the last few years. So let me go through those 4 points that we've been trying to bring together with a set of actions. Now, first of all, what are we going to do? What do we suggest in the immediate term, in the short term? Now, there are things you can do within the current regulatory framework that can actually significantly help lower the electricity bills, the energy bills of our industry, whether that's energy-intensive industry or whether it's the parts of industry that are helping to deliver our future competitiveness through clean technologies. If you start with the electricity bill, it's a composite of tariffs, taxes, and the actual energy supply. Now, the actual energy supply, that cost is driven up in many cases by high fossil prices, our dependence on imported fossil, on natural gas in particular. These volatile and high-priced global markets are a significant factor. So we will be looking into gas markets. What can we do to improve the functioning of European gas markets? How can we strengthen our position in global gas markets, knowing that we are now dependent on global LNG markets? We have become the single largest offtake market for global LNG. So let's try to see how do we best use that? How do we improve the financial aspects of gas markets? Now, that's the energy component. The other thing you can do on the energy component is to significantly increase supply of renewables as quickly as possible. It is the fastest source, it is the lowest cost source, so the faster we do that, the more we can accelerate that, the better. Permitting times matter, so we're looking into that as well. Now, looking at the other components of the bill, we've got the tariffs. If we make better, we know tariffs are not going to go down because we need investments into infrastructure and that will have to be paid by tariffs. But we do know that if we design the tariffs in a smarter way so that they're more cost reflective, we can push demand to the times when there is less pressure on the grid and therefore make better use of the low cost or even negative cost energy that we have at significant parts of time. And then you have taxation. In the current regulatory framework, member states can actually lower the tax rate on electricity and thereby incentivize electrification by industry, which is a significant factor in our competitiveness as well as in our decarbonization and in our security because it reduces the demand for the imported fossil fuels. So those are some of the immediate term measures that can be done without any legislative change. It's a question of doing it and making it happen. Now, more structurally, we know we need to go from the energy union we have to a genuine energy union, an energy union that delivers. It requires closer cooperation, it requires electrification, it requires investments into grids, it requires more cross-border infrastructure, it requires more tradable capacity cross-border, more flexibility, more storage. All of these things take a bit more time, but fundamentally they hinge on the political engagement, the readiness by national governments and by all of us in Brussels to take those steps to strengthen the energy union and make better use, reduce the inefficiencies in the system, lower the system costs, avoid curtailment, and simply make a better system. But no one can do it on their own. It requires us to work together. So the energy union and those investments are a critical part of lowering energy costs over time. That brings me to the question of how do we deliver? Because again, no one can deliver on their own. It requires us to work together. So we're suggesting two mechanisms to address that. The first is we need an energy union task force where governments, all member states, but also industry and other stakeholders come together to look at what can be done. And it has to be done at a fairly high political level because there are decisions that are difficult. At times you need to look not just at the immediate national interest, but what works, what is in the European interest in terms of the future investments into grid and infrastructure. What does it make sense to have a national capacity mechanism, or can you actually share that across borders? So an energy union task force to come together and help deliver that. The other thing we see is that for industry, whether it is energy intensive industry looking to electrify or whether it is large project developers in offshore wind, for example, we see that the uncertainty is an absolute killer for investments. We need predictability, stability, and we need to make sure that there is a better visibility of what will the investments be, what will the projects be. If energy project developers know what's coming online, they are in a better position to secure their supply chains and to do that at a lower cost, overall reducing costs of the large offshore wind projects or the large energy projects. They will know that if governments come together, not just to make statements about what are the gigawatt that's going to come online, but actually do plans and commit to that in a contract. And for the energy-intensive industries, they can make the necessary capital investments into electrification if they know that the electricity will actually be coming online. It will be clean and it will be at an affordable price. So you need these three parties to come together, which is the reason we have suggested a tripartite contract. And it's a contract. It is not something we talk about. It is an actually engagement by these three parties and their supply chains to help deliver lower price energy and more certainty on what is coming online, what are the investments that are planned. And then the security, as I mentioned, we have seen the costs of an energy crisis, the costs of the uncertainty in global markets. So we need to make sure that we are prepared for whatever crisis comes, whatever crisis can come next. The global situation, the geopolitical situation is so uncertain and so challenging. We cannot reduce the uncertainty that others create, but we can reduce the uncertainty in Europe by our own actions. And so that preparedness, that readiness for future crises, that security of supply framework is also an absolutely critical component of affordable energy and competitiveness in Europe. So those are the main points, but all, of course, within the context of the Clean Industrial Deal, where simplification is another key component, also in the field of energy.
Thank you, Ditte. Judith Curtin-Darling, Secretary-General of Industrial, you represent the tens of millions of Europeans who work in manufacturing.
And energy.
And energy, thank you. Who make it all happen and who count on it for their own personal economic security. Do you think the Commission is doing the right things?
Is it a yes/no answer?
Yes.
I think the first thing is that it's got to be said that it's a really significant moment for Europe, that there's a recognition that Europe needs an industrial policy. And the industrial deal is a positive signal in that sense. I mean, we sat together in Antwerp in February last year calling for an industrial deal. And the fact that that's been delivered and that it covers, in our view, all of the right topics is really positive. But then when you get into the detail, the picture is a little bit more murky. And when we look at, I thought it was very interesting in the intervention at the beginning to talk about the fact that the proposals are, in a way, a repackaging of our existing strategy. What is new in terms of the proposals in the Clean Industrial Deal is a very short list compared to what was already somewhere in proposals that were already on the table. And for us, that raises a real anxiety, because I represent workers who are in industries which are in sites which are massively underutilized in the automotive sector at the moment, or are subject to that demand flexibility. So our workers arrive on a Monday morning and they're told you'll work for 2 hours on Tuesday because there's a gap in electricity demand here, and you'll work on Thursday for 3 hours because there's a gap. That all of these measures have enormous impacts on the workforce. So one of the things which I think isn't in the package at the moment is the urgency that we need some measures to be put in place. And that's what fundamentally we really missed, also in the Affordable Energy Action Plan, but in the Clean Industrial Deal. And I would bring it back to the topic here, competitiveness and security. When we talk about security, we all too often we're talking about the geopolitical external security. But our internal economic security is the basis on which we can create a stronger European external security position. And our internal economic security is really challenged by this high level of anxiety of the European workforce about the way forward and what is happening. And that's what we hear day in, day out from our members. So when you go through the different elements of the plan, and obviously you don't have time for me to give you a 3-hour lecture on our position on each part of the plan, but this urgency is the thing that we're really missing. I give you an example. 4.3 million workers across Europe are today only protected by labour market buffers in manufacturing and in industry. So they're subject to short time working conditions, they're subject to temporary unemployment programs, and the final investment decisions in many of the industries that they're working in will be made in this quarter, next quarter. The question is, will those final investment decisions be guaranteed by an action which in the plan is due to come in 2026 or at the end of, or in 2027? This is for us really the fundamental thing that's concerning from our perspective. So maybe I'll stop there, but happy to come back in on the other elements.
Thank you very much, Judith. Witold Literacki, Vice President of the Management Board of ORLEN. Europe is counting on big companies like yours to make investments in clean tech, clean energy, the decarbonization of energy-intensive industries. Have you got the business case to make those investments?
And we are the big investor. But first of all, I remember now some sentence from one movie. What kills us faster, CO2 or enemy from the east? I don't know, but I will try to imagine. Of course, in this situation, maybe we should consider what to do with the regulations, yes, because we have two enemies now. And of course, the poorness is the third. So in this case, we should think maybe a little bit from different side, like people from out of European community. We have been on CERAWeek, and they are speaking, and the rest of the world watching us as a part of museum, because it's nice to come to Europe and to go for journey, to eat something very good and to watch the beautiful buildings, cities, etc. But nobody wants to invest here. What's going on? I don't know, maybe you know. We have a problem, yes, because maybe 1 or 3 or 5 or 10 years, no investment from the biggest corporations, and we will see what happened. I don't know what happened. But in this situation, we are the company. Of course, we have a power. We are producer of energy. We are producer of gas, of oil, of electricity, etc., etc. We, of course, understand the problem with the environment, and we are doing everything to be prepared and to decarbonize. We're spending and we will spend a huge money. In 10 years, it is about $100 billion. $100 billion, exactly. So in this case, it's a huge investment. But such a money in USA, corporations spent on drilling, and once again drilling, and they are selling what they drill to Poland, to Deutschland, to France, etc., so to European community. As they said, more than 60% of their gas which they drill, they selling to the European community. So in this case, of course, we need this gas, yes, but they will be rich and more rich, and we will be client. Of course, we see some solution. If we would like to buy this gas, maybe we should invest in the United States and in the place where we can, I don't know, in some places where we can make from the normal gas LNG or something, etc., like making it Japanese corporations. So in this case, maybe it's a solution. We will see, because we will speak with them. But maybe we should make very good regulations for our companies, it means the European community, and to focus on our own sources. We have, of course, the methane regulations, but they are very strong. And I think that if we have to, because it exists, if we have to fulfill all regulations from the methane directive, we have still the more and more expensive gas. So our source is very expensive. So maybe we should buy it out of the European community. So it's very easy, yes. It's because we are speaking about the many cases on the very high sophisticated level, but we are not speaking about two: business, money, and the people. How to make this business if everything is expensive here? Yes, okay, we should buy it abroad. And I was talking with the person from India, and he told me, buy from India, because here is cheaper than in China. Okay, so the competitiveness is even between these countries. So how we can do it, and how we can fight with the companies from such a countries, will never win. Yes, of course, we should care about our market. We have a CBAM. Maybe we should do something more. But I still have now the producers, because maybe it will be cheaper to buy from India and to pay the CBAM, and it will be easier for me because I will be only the seller, trader, and I needn't to invest. This is such a easy, yes. Maybe I'm wrong, but try to imagine what happened in the future. So in this case, we think this decarbonization is very important. I understand it, and we will do it. But maybe we shouldn't do it so fast, because we have very strict regulation when what should happen. And for this moment, we should invest huge money in very short time. Maybe we haven't this money, because we have earned first this money. So maybe we should, I don't know, to carry forward the date 2027 when ETS2 will start. Maybe we should postpone it, yes, on the few years. I'm not saying no, stop, decarbonization is bad, etc., etc. No, I'm saying only please carry forward it. The same with the RED III regulations. Maybe we should do it from the next years, because what's going on with RED III, maybe people don't know. RED III, this is such a regulation which saying that in 2030 you need to have in your fuel 29% of biofuel. Very good, and I understand it. But we haven't enough in Europe producing systems to biofuel installations. Even if you would like to do it, to invest huge money for these installations, we have no, I don't know how to say it in English. We have no something from which we could produce this biofuel. This is the problem. Resources. Oh, great. Thank you very much. We have no resources. And what's going on? We should buy it from which country? China. China. And if everybody will buy from China, the prices will be higher, etc., etc. So we still are thinking about European community and environment, but we are not thinking about the business, and we are not thinking about the people. Because what happens in the future? The energy will be very expensive. So it means, but energy, it's a right for the citizens. It's not a luxury. What's going on? Look at this. For the farm, for the wind farm, we of course we are building now, and we will build the next. But 1.2 gigawatt for such a wind farm on the offshore cost is near 5 billion euro. 5 billion euro. It's a huge money, yes. And of course, it's a very good. But if we spend such a money, we would like to earn. So how much we should pay for the electricity in this case, for the citizens, how much should pay, yes? So in this case, it's very easy to calculate. So maybe we should consider first, where are the citizens? The citizens will pay more and more and more. Of course, you try to think about it. I'm not thinking that it's wrong, but maybe we should do something to find the solution. The solution, in my opinion, is to carry forward the dates when we will introduce the next regulations. And it's okay. We are the company where we are investing in the carbonization, as I said, $100 billion in next 10 years. And we will do it. But maybe we should spend this money on something different.
Thank you, Witold. Investors from around the world, but mostly from Europe, including your own company, last year invested 32 billion euros in new wind farms, which is actually not enough, but it's better than nothing. Marco Mensink, Secretary General of CEFIC, Europe's Chemical Industry Association. European chemicals companies have been investing in China, in the US in the last year or two. How's the investment picture in Europe today for your industry?
I thought I'd get a question where I could react in a positive way.
We'll give you one later.
Okay, and I'm a bit under pressure because my daughter studies in a school with Arancha, and I sent a picture saying, "Look at me." And she didn't say, "I'm proud." She says, "Can you please behave?" Exclamation. So I'm handicapped on stage. I just came out of Houston this morning. I've been home yet. I came out of the plane to the panel because I think BSP is doing a great day today, and thank you for that. Not only from Sarah Week, also from the World Petrochemical Congress. And as expressed, there's just amazement around the world in the way Europe is treating itself. I think that was the main feeling I got. I should also say you witnessed that the US industry at the moment doesn't dare to speak up in public on anything. and I'd rather live here than over there. That's my private view. Don't quote me in the press, but there's a benefit of still being in Europe. If we want to be positive, let's take that one clearly on the floor as such as well. I met there with the CEO of one of the largest companies you guys don't know. And while I was there, they launched a press release that they were shutting down in Rotterdam. And we lost 2 chemical sites this week. And you see me get emotional there. Actually, one of my team members who is up here built that factory and had the feeling his baby after 23 years was down the drain, which should have become at least 50 years old, because that would be a normal lifetime. The reason those sites are shut is energy cost, period. And that's just the beginning. It's not the sense of urgency that Jude is missing. We're too late. We're shutting down as we speak in the chemical industry. And I think the complexity, even compared to steel, is that steel is shutting down capacity. We're shutting down entire chemistries at the moment, which you will not get back. Match that with the security angle. I don't know if you're aware, but for 95% of our vitamins, we're now depending on China. So you don't need war. They just shut down the pharmaceuticals and the vitamins, and we don't eat, and we don't get better. That's how the whole situation is now blurring, for which reason we started Antwerp a year ago with Jude, with others here. We've just had President von der Leyen back in Antwerp. And if you take a step back, Antwerp has had an amazing effect in getting competitiveness back on the agenda. If I now talk to my members, they say that's absolutely great, but by the way, the economy has gotten worse twice as fast as you could get the policy on the table. So we need urgent action right now. I took something else back from the US, which is a bit outside my portfolio, but it was mentioned. The race for AI. The key competitive thing now in the American mind is how to beat the Chinese on AI. They were spooked by the developments in China, but the race for AI is actually a race for energy. The estimated electricity consumption for AI in Europe is 165 terawatt hours. That's equal to the electricity consumption in the entire chemical industry. So if you quickly do math, and I'm not a mathematician, the 2040 impact assessment says we need to double the volume of electricity as soon as we can. My math will tell you as well at half the price. So twice the volume, half the price. The good news is all the energy companies make exactly the same money, which they don't agree to, by the way. But we need twice the volume at half the price. That's without AI. And we're currently giving all those renewables to data centers, not to industry, not to steel, not to hydrogen for steel, not to chemicals. So that's the puzzle you're looking at, which is humongous. That's what Ditte said, we're not going to solve short term. The only way to save my plants is get the energy cost down now. That means taxes need to go, additional taxes need to go, tariffs need to go. And you might see sort of a social housing system for electricity, and I'll explain, and then I'll shut up, Giles. When you build a neighborhood in my country and you want subsidies, the government tells you that 20% of the houses should be for poor people. Why are we subsidizing the power sector without even asking, saying 20% of the electricity goes to hard-to-abate sectors and energy-poor households? Which comes close to the French nuclear quota. But I think those kind of measures will now be needed, which is emergency, shorter term, to keep industry actually in Europe and running. Thanks, Giles.
Thank you, Marco. Very interesting idea. Social housing system for electricity. Ditte, you now work for the European Commissioner for Energy and Housing. What do you think of this idea of Marco's?
Well, I think we need to look at all the options out there to address the competitiveness challenge, and that's what we're trying to do in the Affordable Energy Action Plan, including those immediate terms that you referred to, tariffs, taxes. Access to energy, as you're saying, it's a competition between energy-intensive data centers and AI users and energy-intensive industries and obviously other uses as well. So it is one of the things we need to look at. I think the first point in that is it only makes sense to look at it if you have additional grid, additional generation capacity, additional infrastructure, flexibility and storage coming online as well. Otherwise, there is nothing to share. So that's the first point. We need that supply, we need it quickly, and we need to simplify and accelerate permitting in order to make that happen. The second point is this question of giving access to one sector over another. It's been discussed in the Steel and Aluminium Action Plan. It's been discussed in relation to the e-vehicles, e-transport. So that is very much on the agenda to look at how do you best do it. One of the principles we have in our regulatory framework is equal access to the grid for very obvious reasons. And the question is, how do you then marry those two principles? On the one hand, making sure that there is equal access, but at the same time, building in the industrial policy component so that we can deliver what needs to be delivered to the industries that need that. So I would say in where we are now in terms of competitiveness, security and decarbonization, there is no proposal that we should not consider, look at and try to make it happen as quickly as possible.
Can I jump on? You will bypassing Giles. Mm-hmm. One of our biggest frustrations, we need to electrify, that's clear. We have the electric cracker. We designed the breakthrough technology of the future. For that, we need a massive load of electricity. The grid operator said, please come back in 2035. By then, the ETS has killed us. Fact. I can show you the location. There's multiple. So those companies who do want to invest in those big projects can't get the electricity to go there. So why not access to the grid based on the CO2 savings achieved? Show me how much CO2 the data center achieves. Show me how much this decarbonization project achieves. Why not prioritize your grids for direct electrification of industry and not spend your money just on revamping pipelines for hydrogen, which is a waste of electricity in the first place when you then give it to industry, because you lose half in efficiency and another half again. So I think by prioritizing shorter term, you can get these kind of things done.
Did you have the right of reply to that? You said all options were on the table.
Yeah, and I think I don't think there's a fundamental disagreement between us. I think we agree. We see the competition between data centers and manufacturing industry, in particular energy-intensive industry, and we need to make sure that not all the additional electricity generation that comes online is eaten up by data centers and AI. We need data centers, we need AI as well, but we do need the manufacturing industry, so we have to make sure we get it right. I think it still comes back to the point that unless we significantly accelerate the rollout of both energy and the infrastructure needed, then that discussion is mute. It's not moot, it's not relevant. So, yeah.
Okay. Wojciech, you talked about AI and data centers and hyperscalers, and before you were in the government, you worked on the energy supply part of the equation, developing wind farms onshore and offshore. So you've got that whole system perspective, and now you're the guy responsible for making sure those who need energy get it when they want it. Yeah? How does it feel?
First of all, it's a huge responsibility. Because as we have been discussing here, we are in a very specific periods when we need to take actions, we need to take immediate actions. And as we are all discussing here, I think we need to make most of the effort to address all the issues and to help the industry grow. And when it comes to the energy sources, I mean, I believe that first, apparently we have low or zero emission renewables that are pretty fast to develop, and they can guarantee us a low price of electricity. So that's the fastest source to be developed, and we need to invest. But speaking about the AI, the data centers, the hyperscalers, and getting back to the Houston conference, there was a lot of discussion about how nuclear can help in delivering huge volumes of electricity to the data centers. And what they do there in the US, they have all these Amazons, Googles, Microsoft putting a lot of money into developing small modular reactors, large-scale reactors. They're putting billions of dollars of private money. The Nuclear Energy Institute, which is basically a chamber that gathers all the American industry business, has now issued sort of a communication to the NRC, the US regulator, trying and asking to speed up the process of licensing the new nuclear, and they've told me they're able to speed up the process from 5 years to maybe 1 year, 1 year and a half. In Europe, and it's not just to blame anyone here, but in Europe we are discussing to issue an action plan for SMRs maybe at the end of the 26. I know that we have in the governments, in the Commission, limited resources, but we live in the times where, in order to guarantee the development of our industry and fit them with energy supplies they need, we need to try to refer to all the possibilities. Let it be large-scale renewable, small-scale nuclear, gas-fired power plants. We're discussing here. Then we need a lot of energy. So we need to do everything to get it at the lowest cost.
Could I come in just
briefly
on that? Because I think one of the interesting things we have learned over the last 3 years of the Russian war in Ukraine and the energy crisis is our ability to be agile and act swiftly and put things in place. If you look at the significant build-out of renewables over these last few years, the pace with which that has happened is unprecedented in our history. We simply need to continue that. We are still in a crisis. It has a slightly different name and a slightly different context, but it's not an easier crisis. So we need to continue to draw on that ability we have to adapt, to be agile, and to deliver very, very quickly. The second, and sorry, very, very quick point is we've talked about the trilemma, Arancha, of security, decarbonization, and competitiveness. We know that in the field of energy, the reply is actually the same. That if we invest in the decarbonization through renewable energy and clean energy sources, that will also make us more secure and it will make us more competitive. Why? Because our security, the primary risk has been the dependence on fossil supply from the global market. That has risked our security, and it has driven up the energy costs across the European Union. So we know that we know what we need to do. We need to do it faster, and we need to make sure we do it as simple as possible, and that we use whatever tools are necessary to reflect those current challenges.
With the addition, if you allow me, because this is not an invitation to go to Sierra Week next year, but we're all coming out of Houston. One of the discussions there was the application of SMR behind the meter, because the US doesn't have the grids. Yeah. And it's actually industry who can run the SMRs also to supply the data centers and become sort of the moderator of the grid with the renewables there as well. So I think there's a win-win to find. One of our companies has got the permit for the first SMR in the chemical industry in Texas right now, which is quite interesting. The second little point is you can add wind, but as long as we pay through the marginal pricing system CO2, where wind doesn't have CO2, it's just unnecessarily expensive. That's still the case. We're, with the marginal pricing, paying the gas CO2 cost on top of renewables, which could go relatively quickly.
Yes,
and
Ditte,
the electricity market design aim to address exactly that. So what we're trying to do is to decouple retail prices through more PPAs, power purchasing agreements, or contract for difference where there's state aid involved. And that is the opportunity for energy-intensive industry and other industrial users to draw on that and thereby get out of the marginal pricing system and out of that price driven by high fossil prices and CO2.
Thank you. And we all really appreciate how agile and fast you've been in the last 5 years. And we're therefore confident you are going to deliver the urgency that Judith and others are asking for now. Now, Judith, Arancha said we only need 3 things for competitiveness. I thought, gosh, only 3. The right energy prices, financing costs, and skills. Can we deliver on skills?
Well, I'll answer that, but I'll come to the second one first as well, because it's a little bit of an elephant in the room as well. Europe's moved extremely quickly in the last couple of weeks when it comes to investment. If we look at how quickly the decision was taken to lift the fiscal rules in terms of defence spending, and with Rearm Europe, suddenly a package put on the table at the scale of the Draghi report's requests in terms of competitiveness. For us in industry, that as industrial workers, that's extremely striking when you look at the investment gap that we see in terms of the grid, in terms of all of the energy investment, in terms of the transition. And I think the question of investment has to be properly addressed also in this, because that for us is one of the weaknesses in the clean industrial deal. What's on the deal, where's the deal when it comes to the financing? It's largely existing money repackaged, whether that's ETS revenues which are repackaged, or whether it's other sources from the European budget. So I think I would just like to flag that up. Then when it comes to skills and the workforce, clearly we are facing an industrial revolution in terms of industry, in terms of the energy sector. But one of the parts of that revolution which is slightly underappreciated is the social dimension of the revolution. If you look at the automotive sector alone, we have to reskill, upskill, retrain something like 2.4 million automotive workers in the passenger car sector alone by 2030 in order to reach the European legislation targets in terms of electrification. If you look at energy intensive industries, we're talking about several million workers that need to be upskilled and reskilled in the next few years as well to be able to manage the electric crackers, the transformation in the steel sector, glass, ceramics, and then in the energy sector, and there we have big projects with Eurelectric, but also we've had large discussions with Eurogas as our sectoral social partners. We have a real challenge of, on the one hand, attractiveness. We have big labour shortages in terms of the energy sector today, and that's in part down to attractiveness. But it's also, there's a demographic challenge that we face. And part of that is not resolved in the current framework. So we have a union of skills, which has come alongside the clean industrial deal, but we're still relying on a kind of coalition of the willing agenda when it comes to the social dimension of this transformation, rather than putting in place really a framework for just transition, which would be around really driving forward sectoral transformations through what we would be calling for, which would be a strong just transition legal framework, a right for every worker to training, which would ensure that you would get the flow of workers into reskilling, upskilling. At the moment, far too few workers, despite the need, despite the all of the rhetoric around skills, actually very few workers across Europe actually have access to training in working time and not at their own cost. So if you want to drive a training revolution of the existing workforce, then there has to be an agenda to address these bottlenecks. On the other hand, we also need to attract new people into industry. We need jobs in industry to be presented as an opportunity for women, from people from different backgrounds, for young people. And that means also having an agenda around apprenticeships at the beginning of the working life, but also about apprenticeships in working life. If you look at the IRA, as an example, the IRA has social conditionalities, let's see if they survive Trump, but social conditionalities attached, which are about tying those tax incentives to the hours worked on, for example, the electric vehicle by accredited apprentices and training agreements in the industry. By tying those social objectives to the industrial policy instrument, you actually kind of build a system where there's an incentive to pull people into industry, and you create a far more structured, it's like a shot in the arm for American industry of drawing people in. We haven't got that kind of thinking in Europe. It's starting to come with the clean industrial deal. So we have this element in the general block exemption regulation, which is included in the clean industrial deal. But it's still far too timid to actually tackle the scale of the reskilling and upskilling agenda. And all too often, what we see is then the response is, well, we'll just bring the workers from somewhere else to work in Europe. We use labour mobility to fill the gap that we're not actually dealing with proper labour market policies at European level. And there are real challenges that we're seeing in different sectors around labour exploitation, about the treatment of migrant workers. If you go to the battery sites in Hungary, which are in special export zones out of the reach of the health and safety authorities, large-scale migrant workforces who are already recording quite large exposures to heavy metals and poor working conditions. That's not the kind of working quality which will attract people to say, the green transition is a good transition for me, from a good, organised, unionised workplace with good quality jobs and terms and conditions, to be willing to engage in a transition to a new job. We need to make all of the jobs high quality jobs. So we have a lot of expectations of the quality jobs roadmap, which will be coming at the end of the year, but that has to not be a nice narrative. We need some really concrete actions if we're going to deal with the skills challenge. Otherwise, people will be the bottleneck. We'll have the investment, we'll have the plan for the grids, but we won't have the people in the factories who are able to make the widgets and watchets to ensure that those grids can actually be built properly.
Thank you, Judith. You mention access to finance. The Commission have been quite generous in the Clean Industrial Deal, this new €100 billion industrial decarbonisation bank. Marco, Witold, Wojciech, Arancha, any of you, are you confident that industry is going to be able to use that money as and when they need it, which is like tomorrow? There's talk of auctions, and you think of competitive processes and preparing your bid and waiting for several months till you know whether you've won or not. In the US, the IRA ran on an open door basis. You wanted, you applied. If you tick the boxes, you got the money the next day. Any of you, any observations on how the EU should be dispersing its largesse? Marco.
Few observations. So first of all, we've said since 2005, all the money taken out of industry in the emission trading system should go back into industry, which has never happened. So you've drained the funds from industry indirectly. The second point is that you can get so much CapEx support, but if the OpEx is wrong, you're not going to invest. So with the current electricity prices, and we have those cases, you can do the project, but you go to your board and say, by the way, on day one, I make a loss. And your board says, well, not going to happen. So it has to be both on the CapEx and the OpEx side. And the third one, and this is where it's more peculiar, if you have large-scale projects for decarbonizing in my sector, first of all, your permit might take between 8 and 10 years. If you have to redo the permit of your site. So it's nice these funds are here, but there's additional issues. And the second is that you go in stages in a chemical plant rebuilding, which means you have three subsidy requests in a row with uncertainty in between. And in the current settings, and we're discussing with the Commission how we can improve that, you need the clarity on the entire 3-stage project before you start. You can't just do one and then say, well, let me see if I can get subsidy tomorrow again, and do 2, etc. So I think also there are more discussions needed, but it's not a technicality, it's real, but it's something solvable. The bigger problem is the OpEx versus CapEx.
Thank you, Arancha.
So I want us to stop talking so nicely about the IRA. Look what has happened with the IRA. So we were all really annoyed that the US had invented this magic wand called IRA, and everyone went to the US and was so happy because the door was open. It was a huge shot in the arm. So what's happened now? Where is the shot gone? Now you can't even talk about sustainability. You can't talk about decarbonation. You can't talk about climate change. And you cannot get the money for that. So, careful how we compare ourselves. So, I don't want an IRA in Europe. I want the European version. So, what is the European version? It's a next generation EU. That was the previous screen we had. Grants, loans, and grants for governments in Europe to do decarbonation and digitalization. A lot of the things that we've been discussing here is in their hands. So it's in your hands, sorry. So I think we need a big doses of accountability here. Yeah. because there has been an unprecedented effort at doing something that Europe had never done, which is go to capital markets, raise financing at low cost to digitalize and decarbonize. So, frankly, I want to know what has happened with this financing. Permitting, it's a huge issue, but this is not a question for this city. Permitting is a huge issue in each one of the member states. And this is an area where instead of only asking for deregulation in Brussels, we have to make sure that there is faster permitting in each one of the member states. Same with financing more broadly. It's not that Europe is poor. Europe has a hell of a lot of money. It's just that this money is not leveraged. So we know what it takes to leverage the pension funds in Europe. We know what it takes to better put these savings to good use, to invest. Let's ask for that. Let's ask. So first, I want us to ask for accountability on all the financing that has been made available, to know and to make sure that it is used for the purposes of scaling up, because I agree that if we don't scale up and we move faster, there's going to be very little to support in the future. So I very much agree with you, but I want one, accountability, and I want two, action on how to leverage and release all this financing that exists in Europe and use it here instead of sending it to somebody else's stock market or investment markets.
Thank you, Arancha, for making us focus on money. There is some very, very good news on money, and he's called Friedrich Merz.
Yeah.
It is transformational,
Correct.
What is happening in Germany. How can Europe benefit from this? Ditte, I bet you're excited in the Commission, aren't you? Yeah, Germany finally tearing up its foolish fiscal policies and investing properly.
Well, I think what we're seeing in Europe and more or less all over Europe these last few weeks is a good example of the ability to adapt and react and come together in a crisis with the best possible thing. Now, obviously, the German plans and the German investments will have a significant impact on Europe by their sheer size and by the importance of the German economy and the German market for all of Europe. With that and the other challenges we face, there is an immense opportunity for Europe. And I agree with Arancha. We don't need to try to emulate bad ideas from elsewhere. We have enough going for us in terms of the predictability, in terms of the market, in terms of the integration and our ability to act together, and that's what we need to do. Now, on the financing side, maybe a couple of points. Again, today is a very, very good day to have this event. We have come forward with a project, with a proposal, with an initiative on capital and finance, and so we need to help make that happen so that we can deliver. Secondly, the state aid framework that is out for consultation now and linked to the Clean Industrial Deal has addressed a number of the points that have been raised today, but it is out there for consultation. So now is a moment to provide comments and to look at what do you think is missing, what could be done differently to further accelerate and make it easier. As you mentioned, Marco, one of the challenges we see in the economy is the capex, OPEX, and we need to make sure that we are able to address that. Now, as Arancha said, one of the issues to look at is how do we best make use of the public funds that we do have. We know that most of the investments, if you look at the energy sector alone, we're going to need around 600 billion investments per year between now and 2030 and more beyond that. But if we just focus on the coming 5 years, we know that around 70% or more of that will have to be private investments. We know that there is significant savings sitting out there waiting to be invested. And so we need to look at, well, what can we then do to release all those funds? We know, by the way, that on the other side of the Atlantic, there are large investors looking to continue investments into green projects, into green energy, because they see it as a good business case. It's a case that makes sense. So the opportunity is there, the moment is there. How do we best make use of our public funds, not to fund what is essentially for the market, but to make sure that we de-risk and leverage the instruments we have. So that is some of the things we focus on. Again, I think the single most important factor in de-risking is the predictability and the regulatory stability. We have that. But we can also see that in the global instability that we're facing, that is not quite enough. And so what are the instruments? What else can we do to de-risk and lower the risk in these investments to help make them happen? Simplification, and again, the acceleration in permitting, you mentioned it again, those in themselves are de-risking factors that we need to look at and to improve.
Witold, one thing, what would you ask Ditte for to help de-risk the investments that ORLEN want to make?
More incentives, less penalties.
That seems pretty clear. Okay, thank you. Now, we've gone a long time talking about economic security without mentioning trade. Arancha, you once wrote a book, Making Trade Work for Prosperity, People and Planet. Do you still think it can?
Well, it does. It's not that it can, it's that it does. It does. Also, certainly in Europe, also in China, but also in the US. So the problem is, it's not that it doesn't. The problem is that alongside the benefits, there are also cost implications, there are also challenges, that the churn that you generate when you open markets, the combination of trade, technology, and there is a lot of technology, maybe more than there is trade, the churn creates costs, creates challenges for workers, creates challenges for distribution. And what we see is that there are parts of the world where the challenges of distribution are better tackled than others. And there is a particular place, I'll not name names because it's not nice, but there is one place in the world where they appropriate the benefits and externalize the costs to the rest of the world. This is what we are seeing today. But it's not that it doesn't work. It's that you have to be careful to also take care of the costs.
Thank you. Wojciech, Arancha also said earlier, we've got to have a functional relationship with China. Yeah. In the Polish government, you're very clear about your relationship with Russia. Fine. Black and white. How do you see China?
It's probably a very difficult question to be answered because I mean, with Russia, it's a bit different situation because what happened in 22, it got a very straightforward implications, and I don't believe we can get back. I mean, at least for the years to come, to the business as usual with Russia. When it comes to, and of course in Poland we have a different sensitivity about Russia because of our long and difficult history. When it comes to China, I think the situation is much more complex because we are, and it was even said here today, we are to some extent dependent because there is a lot of industry, there is a lot of production that is coming from China to Europe. There is a lot of export from Europe to China, and we cannot cut it from one day to the other. So definitely we need to cooperate. But I think, and it's also a good answer when it comes to our relation with the US. We are discussing here after what had happened in Washington, how we should react and answer about what is happening in the US. But I believe that the stronger is our economy, the more independent is our economy, the more we cooperate together, and the more we set the objectives for ourselves, being not dependent on the US and on China or India, and then we will be stronger, and the world will be looking on us. Yes. Of course, it does not mean that we need to isolate or we should to isolate and not to cooperate. We have to. But let's focus on what we can do here in Europe how we can work better, how we can make our economy stronger. And the Draghi report says, I mean, we have financial resources. We have a huge market. We have a market of more than 500 million people that wants to work hard and wants to spend money, that can be innovative. So let's try to adapt our regulatory framework. Let's adapt the incentives we are putting on the market to make it work. And one short comment on the regulation. I have been working in my previous life for the Polish TSO, and I remember when I was speaking to one of the directors working in the Department of System Management. He told me back in the 90s, or even at the beginning of this century, we had a lot of engineers working for the TSO and a couple of lawyers. Now we have hundreds of lawyers, and we lack engineers. I think we are over-regulating. It would be probably a good question for Witold, but I've heard speaking to one of the directors in one of the international large company, saying that long time, I mean, some years ago, the business was basically driven by the business units. Yeah, so we have been inventing a product, then we've been checking whether it has a business case, and then it went to the regulatory department to verify how we can implement. Now it's the opposite. The business is driven by the regulatory departments. And the business departments have little to say, because we need to achieve the targets on this. Then we have another sub-targets on this. And achieving the sub-target, we can only use this or that. The business, the wealth, the growth should be driven by the regulation, but also by the invention, by the will and the desire to achieve better, to beat your competition, and not only through regulation. So it does not, again, it's not against the regulation. We need them, especially in the regulated sectors, and especially if we want to build the common markets in different sectors. But instead of regulating, we need to think how to regulating smart, and that's also a point I'd like to make here.
Thank you, Witold. Do you want to respond at all to that? Wojciech was inviting you to comment.
I completely agree. Because we had the situation 1 year ago where we started to think about the SMRs, so small modular reactors, and someone from one of the ministries said, "Nice, we can regulate." so this is some people are focused on to make some idea. Next, they would like to regulate it. So,
thank you, Ditte.
Yes, thank you very much, and I agree with a lot of what Wojciech has said about the trade and investment relation with China. It is an important relation for us economically. We're not looking to decouple, but we do need to de-risk. Now, I think de-risking is more complex because you do need to look at it at a much more granular level. And to give you just a couple of examples from the energy sector taken from the Draghi report, Draghi noted that the Chinese support for solar photovoltaic means that essentially you could argue that the Chinese taxpayer is paying for a lot of the solar that we have installed in Europe over these last few years. And that has helped us increase significantly the share of renewables, lower the overall costs, and reduce our dependence on imported fossil. So that is an overcapacity that has at least brought some benefits to Europe. I'm not saying that's the right thing, but it has brought some benefits to Europe. If you look at the wind sector, unless we continue with the action we have taken and that we have proposed in the wind power action plan, and unless we help strengthen the European competitiveness in the wind sector, now we risk that the wind sector goes that way. That, in our assessment, would not be a benign overcapacity. That would be an overcapacity that would really put European competitiveness and innovation and leadership at risk. So again, we need to look at it sector by sector. We need to be more granular, looking at where do we de-risk and where do we actually see mutual benefits in the trade investment relationships that are there, or simply it has come to a stage where we need to draw the benefits from what is the reality there. The third point I want to make is that when we talk about trade, we obviously talk about trade between the European Union member states and other parts of the world, and that is very important. At the same time, if you look at it at a national level, for most member states, their single most important trading partner is another European Union country. And so the internal market still has immense potential. We benefit significantly, but we can benefit even more. And so that internal market and continuing to build that and build the strength on that is an important part of our work as well, not by regulation, but by the market and by simplification as part of that, but in a predictable regulatory framework for that stability that investors do need.
But can I jump in between you and Giles? So, and I'm going to take a risk by not agreeing with the Dean. One thing that the IRA did well is a value chain approach. And the wind part is really interesting. The Chinese, what we hear, now have wind turbines 20% bigger than ours, which makes electricity 20% cheaper for us. Are we going to buy them or not? That's a strategic question. If then you protect the wind industry, and all the parts actually come from China, but you just assemble them here, have we won anything? If you do the hydrogen auction, but the membranes come from China, have you won anything? So the one thing we really haven't done is take the train and put all the blocks together. And now this is where defense, I think, gets the opportunity. We have chemicals regulation banning chemicals that will miss in weapons. So you will want to defend yourself with weapons for which you depend on exactly the countries you have a problem with. So linking this together is, I think, something for the next months to come, because it's highly complex. And I'm not saying right or wrong, but I would say give my electricity 20% cheaper, first problem solved, which is not a solution for you, which is then indirectly is not a solution for me again. That's the complexity that's going to come.
So I think you can tell your daughter that on this one, you and I fully agree that you need a value chain approach.
And can we reassure you also...
Can we conclude the session now?
One further piece of good news for you, Marco. We're not going to be able to import all the components for wind turbines from China because we're not allowed under EU law to import those components that have sensors on them, because under EU law we're not allowed to export sensitive data to China. Yeah, sensors equals data. Sensors also equals the power to control. Yes, and I need say no more on that. Okay, fine. Thank you very much. We are out of time. Ladies and gentlemen, please thank our fantastic panelists.